And is co-authorship, in the sense that you just outlined, recognised, or is that simply a way of describing it? If for example, it came to a legal test, would an interpretation constitute co-authorship, or would it simply be an interpretation with the authorship residing with the originator of the dance?
It would depend. Often they don't let the dance out. I mean, someone like Mouse Cunningham, for example, they would actually have specific trainers who would go into a company and to work with the dancers, and it still would be a Cunningham dancer. And you know, Cunningham's work, as it stands, changes absolutely on each and every occasion. It's the nature of the work is about change.
So it's a bit like a franchise in some ways.
Yeah, it's a bit like a franchise. And I mean, Matthew Bourne and his company, and all his, you know, his kind of his Mail Swan Lakes and all of that. There are different companies doing that all over the world. It's still Matthew Bourne's Swan Lake. You know. It's not anybody else's. Twyla Tharp's, you know, she choreographed Hair. You know, it's her choreography.
So if we were to take your argument forward, because dance is a living process, do you think in some sense it escapes fixation, that it's always subject to interpretation, it's always handled differently by different dancers, choreographers interpreting previous choreographers and so on, which makes it difficult to fix as an object or as a process even?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to fix because bodies are different, but at the same time dancers are trained in particular traditions, so there is a kind of structure there which has a kind of fixity. You know, we know in classical ballet there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't. Classical ballet training will give you a kind of body, flat back, you know, attention to the upper part and the limbs and so forth, and the turnout and the various other kind of elements of that training, which people have had since they were very young in a very Bourdieuian sense. So it is their habitus. So in a way, it is fixed, but in another way, it's not fixed. So it's not either one or the other. I think it's now whether that fixity whether something becomes fixed once it's filmed is a different matter, and whether the film is a different kind. It's not dance; it's something else as well.
Would you like to enlarge on that a bit?
I don't know. You know, it's always kind of, you know, in a film, for example, if there's a film of a dance, well, where does the dance start and where does it end? You know, there's a kind of a selective process going on as you are making the film. Depending, you can do it from the proscenium arch. And then you get these tiny figures, generally speaking, and you get a sense of the patterning of the dance, perhaps, but not of the visceral nature of dance in terms of, you know, that reception of those bodies moving in time and space. I think it's quite unique. And it's always dangerous because, you know, it can always go wrong. And in a way, that's why I think live performance is really exciting and terrifying, because they just might drop them, or they might fall, and there's always that kind of are they going to make that fish dive today, or whatever. So so I can't remember what I was saying now.
No, that's fine. But just going back to...
It's kind of going on.
No, that's fine. You're going on about the right things. Just going back to liveness. Actually, just going back to what you were saying about filmed dance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in an audience, as a member of an audience, you have probably a fixed point of view. On the whole, you can't move about. Whereas if you're filming, you can film from different angles, so you have a combination of points of view, which obviously makes it different. So the experience of dance as a member of an audience is going to be different from the filmed representation of dance for several reasons. One of which would of course be that it's a representation, but another would be that you at least have the opportunity to take different angles, as it were, different points of view.
No, you don't as a viewer.
No. The film, the filmmaker has a chance of taking different points of view of the process of dancing.
And that's why they need to be really movement conscious, because if they're not, I mean, some of the best stuff I think is in football, for example. Fantastic filming of football. You know, apply that to dance would be brilliant, actually. And there are some amazing directors or producers, whoever, who are really excellent at filming dance. And they seem to understand it. Bob Lockyer, for example, very important. David Hinton did a lot of dance films for Dance on 4 and for South Bank, and really understand what it is to capture movement in a kind of visceral sense, although it's almost much more distance, because the way in which you're watching it, it's not the same kind of, I think, sort of kinetic engagement with a body on stage.
Coming back to liveness, which you began to talk about just a moment ago, what makes it attractive, both from the point of view of the audience and the point of view of the dancer relating to an audience?
Because the dancer can, well, I suppose it's like any performance, you know, you can feel the audience, and that's really important.
What does it mean to feel the audience?
It's a kind of, I suppose it employs different kinds of senses of understanding. It's kind of metakinesis, really. There's a sense of, is this, you know, how is this audience reacting? And you're not just there performing, but you're performing to an audience made up of a diverse number of people who are on different layers, probably, if it's in a large theatre, or in a small theatre, it's much more intimate. And there's a kind of, I think there's a kind of kinetic connection, really, that's the way that I would like to put it, which engages both the performer and the audience member.
And from the point of view of the audience, you talked earlier about danger and things possibly going wrong. Is that part of the attraction of actually viewing dance, or only part of it, obviously?
Yeah, it is for me, actually. You know, but and I think, you know, I had a former colleague who just couldn't go to a live performance because of the danger. He always thought something was going to go wrong, and I thought, yeah, but that's what's really nice about it. Not that you want it to go wrong, because you don't want it to go wrong, but it's that kind of, it's like life on the edge, actually. And for me, that's what makes performance really alive, rather than, you know, dead.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about filming performances, the viewing the experience as a representation, a filmed representation, doesn't convey that viscerality that you were.
No, it doesn't.
About.
But that's, I think, you have to treat it as a different thing. You know, you treat it as a film, not as a performance. And again, there's lots of choreographer artists who are, you know, very in tune with the relationship between the more kind of multimedia oriented, and therefore are quite engaged by using that to their advantage. And again, you always kind of come back to Cunningham and his work with Charles Atlas, for example. And I think his kind of idea that, you know, the dance only happens when the film is. It's not something else. So it's not what you're missing, it's only what's there. So that's how I would see it. I wouldn't see it as a representation of something, I'd see it as that's the dance. And it's, that's all you're going to get. And that's all there is. So you don't need to think about what happened before and what happened afterwards, because what you have is what's there. So I'm quite into that, actually. Quite good. I haven't thought about it before.
Just moving on to quite a different area, which is, we talked about the poverty of most dancers, and
Yes.
Dance isn't thought of as part of the creative industries, oddly enough. Is there a space for some kind of policy intervention?
Well, there are policy interventions.
So would you like
Dance
to
UK,
elaborate?
for example, is very good at...
Survived the Colour of the Quangos, has it, so far?
Sorry?
It's survived the
Colour
Colour
of
of
the
the Quangos.
Because it's a very strong organisation for performers, and it does a very good service for dancers. But it also has, you know, it encourages you to get on the site and to go to your MPs, to make public policy, you know, to really push it out through the manifestos and things. And I think it's really important. I think it does a very good job for that very small dance industry of about 40,000. It's quite a lot, isn't it?
And in terms of law, are there legal provisions that you think are missing from the current scene in terms of maybe protecting dancers' rights?
Property rights. You know, it's really difficult, isn't it? You know, working in the creative arts, you wonder if all that protection just might stifle the creativity, or how far can you say that something is entirely original when you're working within a tradition and you're drawing on all kinds of ideas, particularly embodied ideas, and choreographers who are working very closely with dancers in a way that they use their dancers' very particular, you know, histories, not only of their bodies, of their lives, like Barish, for example. And it is very much a collaborative piece, because without those dancers, the piece wouldn't exist, because of the way in which they work. So I'm just not... I kind of worry that to fix it too much would actually destroy a kind of creative impulse and a kind of playfulness with tradition, which is very important to developing new ideas and stuff.